Thank you, Amy. So I wanted to just start, well, welcome everybody back from the lunch hour. I wanted to start with just a few items I wanted to go over before we proceed on to where we left off before the break. Um, we do have our colleague Ronald Sand joining us from the Office of General Counsel. Ron, do you want to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here and look forward to working with you in the hours and days ahead. Thank you.
So Ron will be filling in, well, replacing Steve Finley for our discussions. Also, once we get into subpart P, we do have Soren Lagarde, who also works in our Office of General Counsel, who will be replacing Ron for that discussion. So for the disclosures discussion and for the Pell calculation, for the Pell discussion for reducing the scheduled award if reducing the award if there's other aid involved and it exceeds cost of attendance, that'll be Ron. And then once we transition to subpart P, it'll be Soren Lagarde. And I will allow Soren to introduce himself. I also wanted to speak a little bit about the technical difficulties we had earlier. Because we can't, because we're all in the Teams meeting, the public and the subcommittee, there's no real kind of break we can do. So if we do have, if we do have technical difficulties this afternoon, I'll likely just ask all the subcommittee members to turn their cameras off and mute their microphones while the department works to resolve those technical issues. I will pause. Ann Forsyth indicated that she would be joining us for the afternoon session, and is the as a reminder, the main committee voted to add Ann from the Missouri Department of Corrections to both the main and the subcommittees as an additional member. I want to pause to ask Amy, has Ann joined us?
I am looking right now, and I don't think she has yet.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
And so with that said, I'll pause there. Are there any questions before we dive back into the language?
I don't see any hands.
Okay, Vanessa, if you could pull share the regulations onto the screen. We're actually going to go back to 668.32. We had a chance to discuss one of the recommendations that were made. Scroll up, if you could scroll up to the blue highlight. Yeah, so as you all remembered, I stated earlier during my opening remarks, if you will, that any actual language changes that we make during the third session will be highlighted in bright blue. And so we did get a language suggestion from Kim over the break. And so thank you for that, Kim, to further clarify, the language for readers, people who are going to be reading these regulations, to try and make them more clear. And so, Kim, we appreciate the suggestion, and what we've done is we've kind of amended your suggestion to break it out. So so we still maintained the Romanettes 1 and 2. We didn't want to add a C because of the structure may not flow very well, and it almost kind of could seem as though maybe students that enroll in prison education programs also wouldn't have to, and it would have to be their first, baccalaureate or professional degree, or enroll in a post-baccalaureate teacher certification program. And so what we've done on your screen is we have changed it. So there's no longer A and B. There's no longer that negative is not confined or incarcerated, but we have combined the two. So if a student is confined or incarcerated, it is a confined or incarcerated individual as defined in, Vanessa, can we actually, I can do it. As defined in 600.2, then the student is enrolled in an eligible prison education program as defined in 34 CFR 668.236. So, Kim, did you want to? Okay, I see a thumbs up. All right. So we can move now to, Vanessa, we can move back to 668.43. Okay, here, give me a second. The computer is running just a little slow. All right. Okay, so we did have 5 thumbs down for this temperature check, and I know that Dr. Mutier had recommended we come back to it. So I'll just go back over some of the things that I said before the break, so that they're kind of fresh on people's minds. Belinda and Dr. Piccioni had recommended to remove upon request from both of the disclosures, I think the concern with that it would so the concern that it would be that students may not know that they have the ability to request these documents, and so we just removed the upon request. So if you're enrolling a student in a program that leads to professional licensure or certification, then you would be required to provide disclosures to those students about the educational requirements and also about if there are any prohibitions on licensure or employment. And Dr. Matier asked us to clarify that these disclosures are only specific to programs that lead to licensure. And so we've removed, we've added if applicable. And there was already if applicable in Romanet 2, but we just added that to Romanet 1. So just to clarify that if it's a general studies or a liberal arts program, then they wouldn't be subject to these disclosure requirements. And I think I can pause there for discussion.
Kim.
Thank you. This is where I think where we had talked last week, a group of us financial aid administrators, and the idea that we don't want to miss the opportunity to talk to students about everything that they're going to encounter, and with the disclosures. Disclosures are very easy to let go or not mention more than once, or even once. So we just want to make sure that there is something put into place. One of the ideas that was mentioned was similar to an entrance counseling that students have to do now with direct loans. Is there something that we could put together that would be something they could go through to make sure that they've heard it at least once, and then really encourage, put in the must language to institutions that they must confirm that that has been completed, and how would they do that, and how often would they need to do that. I just want to make sure we're protecting the students, especially in this licensure piece, that we give them what they need, and not because they don't know what they need. We need to be the ones to make sure that we provide everything up front and as they move along through the program. And I'm just interested in thoughts on that.
Erin, did you want to respond, or should we go to Dr. Matier?
Whoever had their hand up first.
Dr. Matier.
Just to kind of piggyback up off of that, I think that a time frame would be important here. So, it says if applicable, excuse me. I'm assuming that this is going to be on the front end of when they start getting their Pell Grant or receiving Pell Grant, or does this mean that anytime a student wants this information, they could get it throughout that duration and the institution has to provide it? I'm a little unclear as to when this information needs to be provided. And then if I actually like the idea of doing like an entrance and exit type of providing that type of offering. Again, because you can get it in on the forefront, and then it can take years for an individual to complete their program. By that time, laws have changed, policies have changed, and time has moved on. And so I think reiterating that at the end would be something good. But I do think a time frame needs to be in place here. But overall, I'm happy where in the direction this is going. So,
Erin.
Yeah, so for the time for in regard to your time frame comment, Dr. McTier, do you have any language changes that you'd like to suggest that we can put in blue highlight?
Dr. McTier?
Sorry, I was on mute. Um, it's Monday. I would probably say, let me look at it and then get it to you. Something simple, so just give me just a second.
Okay, and also Kim.
In the meantime, oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and Kim, in regard to your language about entrance and exit counseling, I think my colleague David had his hand up. I would like for him to talk about what department currently requirements are around entrance and exit counseling, and
David?
Sure, I can do that. Currently, in order to receive a direct loan, a student has to undergo entrance counseling in which the institution provides information about the obligation that the student is entering into with respect to their direct loan. And provides information about various aspects of how the loan works. But those things tend to be directly focused on the loan itself and what the student, what kinds of, for example, repayment plans are available to the student, et cetera. Exit counseling, similarly, is provided at the end of the student's college experience, either after the student withdraws or after they graduate, and provides similar information explaining what the next steps are for the student, when the student will be expected to repay their loan, begin repaying their loans, and the conditions under which they'll repay the loans. To implement something like what Kim has described here, we would have, I think, one of two choices. We could either create a requirement for the institution to provide that information in a specific time frame, both at the beginning of the student's program and at the end. Or we could condition receipt of Pell Grant funds on, for example, the entrance counseling piece. And of course, there's a lot of complexity associated with that, as I'm sure Kim can attest. But yes, in order to create something like that, we would essentially have to establish all of the timeframes for when that would be required, and also express exactly what it needed to include, both for the entrance and the exit counseling, unless the content was expected to be exactly the same.
Thank you, David. Just a quick follow-up to what you were saying there is, I think it's just a protection piece for the student and for the institution to make sure that they have covered the responsibilities of what the institution knows about licensure and certifications, and whether or not they've provided that information to the student, and so that the student too can know, I choose to move forward with this, knowing that I may not be allowed to get the certification in my state, but it's just a protection for both as they move forward, that those conversations did occur.
Dr. Piccioni?
Yeah, I was just wondering if it might be easier to just take out if applicable. And just say institution that offers an eligible prison education program as defined must provide all available information. You can still do the timeframes, but rather than if applicable, just provide it, whether the completion of that program meets the requirements for licensure or certification.
Aaron?
Thank you, Dr. Piccioni. The reason that we added, if applicable, was due to a recommendation from Dr. McTier that to clarify that not all prison education programs would be subject to these disclosures. It would only be prison education. I see you shaking your head. So should I continue or? Okay. So would you like to add, would you like a comment bubble to be added to remove if applicable?
I think that would be okay to add the comment bubble as well, because
Okay.
this is just for professional licensure or certification.
Correct.
So as Dr. Mateer had said earlier, if you're entering a program and specifically for licensure or certification, you should know that at the beginning of the program, you should know it through the program, and not be surprised at the end of the program. So
So I guess
either,
just to follow back up, I think it would be helpful to have a discussion if Dr. McTier is willing to engage about this language. This was a proposal. Well, we added this based on Dr. McTier's recommendation. So I think we would be at an impasse if we couldn't figure out a way forward. Add if applicable, take if applicable out. I wonder, is there any compromise between the subcommittee members for the language here?
if we put add if applicable, then I think we definitely would need to have the timeframes on there. That would be I would say that would be required. But if we take out if applicable, then it means that you are going to provide it, period. So I don't know that the timeframes would be needed. So one or the other. And I don't have a dog in the fight, so I'm okay. Dr. Mateer, on you, brother.
Dr. McTier.
Okay. First, I want to say that if we can give Dr. Stanley Andres access to mic and video, he just texted me and said he doesn't have access. That's number one. Number two, I like what's going on here with what's proposed, the if applicable provides, yada, yada, yada. I would just add for the language and the time frame, we're probably saying prior to distributing Pell to students. And prior to the student exiting the program or something to that effect. So it kind of gives you that time frame.
Okay, if you could give Vanessa a second. I'm sorry, Sophia, to jump in, but if you could give Vanessa a second to type those in there. Vanessa, okay. Can you add that language in highlighted in blue? Dr. Mateer, I don't know if, can you repeat that where exactly we'll go?
Are you ready for me?
I am. Where do you want it in the sentence?
Okay. It looks like if we say if applicable, provides the information, completion of the prison education program. If you can scroll down a little bit. We would just need to say prior to distributing Pell to students. It looks like it might go at the end. And prior to the student, and then adding and prior to the student exiting the program, that prison education program or whatever. If it doesn't work there, we can kind of finesse it to go a little bit somewhere in that definition.
Next will be Marissa.
So I just want to say that this is so important to have the entrance and the exit, and I think the time frame is super important also. But would there be any way to put in there some kind of in conjunction with DOC education staff at the correctional facilities, so it also holds them accountable and that it's a realistic pathway for the students?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm getting an echo. So I think the time frame should be in there. The exit and the entrance counseling. But also, can we put in there in conjunction with Department of Corrections education staff at correctional facilities? So that also holds corrections accountable for this time frame and the counseling, so they know the pathway.
Okay, so Vanessa, do you know where you would like that to be? And if not, maybe Vanessa can just add a comment bubble with that language. Marissa, do you have a place in the regulation that you'd like it to sit?
I'm looking.
Okay, all right. So Vanessa, can you add a comment bubble and then just Marissa, if you wouldn't mind repeating that one more time.
So somewhere in there, in conjunction with Department of Corrections, education staff at the correctional facilities, so that corrections is also held accountable. And
Could you repeat it slower? You sound very echoey.
I'm getting an echo on this end too. I'm sorry. In conjunction with Department of Corrections staff, education staff actually, at the specific correctional facility. And that there needs to be a time frame on the entrance and exit counseling for accountability.
Kim?
Thank you. So knowing that financial aid administrators are very familiar with this language, we look for must, we look for may in our language of, how strong is it to follow through on. I think if you wait until the Pell is dispersed or prior to the Pell disbursement, you've waited too late. Because you could have schools that wait until end of the semester to start doing that, since there's no rush to do that until the end of the semester. I think it's an onboarding piece that we need to look at here. If we know that we're going to be offering a program that is going to end up with a licensure or certification, I think you need to let the students know that up front in the onboarding piece, so that they know and they have a choice at that point to either participate in that one or change if there's another offering. How the correctional facility may have limitations to access to that student, so we would have to be careful in how we establish those conversations. Could it be like, I know right now, if we look at the entrance and exit counseling kind of idea, that is an online process. Well, not all the students will have that access. So just keeping that in mind, I think it should be definitely an onboarding piece and not something that schools could wait to say, oh, we'll get them enrolled, we'll get them moving through, and then we'll tell them. And then we still get the predatory type of institutions could use that kind of thought process.
Thank you. Sophia, before we move to Dave, can we add, Vanessa, can you add a comment bubble to the blue text that was added, like where that Dr. Mateer added, and just that Kim suggested prior to enrollment, Kim, or do you want to say onboarding or prior to enrollment?
Prior to enrollment in the onboarding process.
Okay. And then Vanessa, you can say because this institution may not disperse Pell. The institution may not disperse Pell until the end of the payment period. Thank you. Thank you, David, for allowing me to jump ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
No problem at all. I wanted to flag for the subcommittee that There are some considerations about when a student exits that are incorporated into the exit counseling regulations that may be important here as well. And I'm actually looking to Kim, who's probably familiar with Return of Title IV and how withdrawals sometimes work. The exit counseling regulations specify that when we say exit, we either mean one of two things. Either the school is required to provide the exit counseling shortly before the student borrower ceases to be enrolled, or if the student borrower withdraws from school without the school's knowledge, the school has 30 days to provide the information to the student. So if that's what you guys intend, we may need to include that somehow in these provisions. And I would throw it back to the subcommittee members to ask you about that point.
Belinda.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this conversation that we're having thus far. Wearing my former educator hat and former prison education program director hat, I just wanted to offer up whether or not this meets with subcommittee members with what has already been said. But I wonder in that blue text where Dr. Mateer had entered some, given that school programs, prison education programs, we all have calendars that we submit to everyone, students, administrators, financial aid, everyone has like an academic calendar. I wonder, bringing up Kim's excellent point and others' excellent points, whether or not we could have language that says, that this information must be given to students before like the drop add period, like that's a specific noted period every semester in an academic calendar, which lets students know that, hey, if you want to sign up for this course, you've got until this date to drop that course, and there's no penalties for your Pell or other things like that. So I wonder if, because that's always something that's very finite every semester usually, and that would be something that the educational partner should, I think it's almost mandated, would give to the correctional facilities, would give to the students. Everyone would have that calendar. So I wonder if we could offer up as a suggestion that we put, rather than prior to distributing or something like that, actually say, I don't know what the standard template is for students, but, students are given this information, at least, 5 days before the drop add period, for each academic semester, so that students are always, every semester, if they want that said, information, they're having it available to them every semester that they potentially sign up for a course in this kind of program. So I just offer that up to colleagues.
Stan?
Quickly, Vanessa, can you add that suggestion under Kim's? I'm sorry to jump in, but when people make suggestions, I think it had been noted that it'd be best to capture them, right in real time. So thank you for that, Belinda.
So I think mine goes to the next. I was kind of raising my hand in anticipation of commenting on the next part. So if we're not there, I can hold off on because were we simultaneously looking at Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2? Or
yeah, essentially, because we had not proposed. I think we proposed very minimal updates to it, so we were looking at them all both together.
Okay, then my comment is, so, I don't want to discourage the creation of programs that might lead to licensures that are currently really not sure if a person with criminal convictions can obtain that degree. And I had given, in last time we met, examples of people like myself who have gone through and broken ceilings to be in employment, to work in positions that would not normally be suited for people who have criminal convictions. And I also noted that there are other individuals who have broken barriers in, becoming lawyers, getting licensed, and getting their bar to, practice law, and individuals within our program who are nurses and working towards their medical degree. So, I mean, I think to say that, for instance, this current text would discourage a program from offering a pre-law track or a pre-med track or a pre-health track because, there are said barriers in place. So I have issues with this particular piece here. I think we should word it to where it is acknowledged that there are barriers to push forward in that particular path, but to say that it can't be offered, that a program can't be offered, we are discouraging even the creation of the program. So, people like Dr. McTier will look at this language and say, there's no point of me trying to create a pre-health program. It's not going to go through. So I think we need more, I think we need to make the language inviting so people like Dr. McTier in his position would be willing to create programs. And I think, Belinda, we had put together some suggestions for this particular text.
Kim.
Belinda, if you want to go ahead and acknowledge that, then I can come back.
Thank you, if that's okay. Yes, so
Yes.
you're right, Stanley. We do have language, but it's for another section of it. It will then, for that other section, will end up being cross-referenced with this one, but not particularly for that particular one. But let me double check, my friend. But I believe that where we put the mandatory language was in the PEP one, which is Part P, which we're going to talk about later on this afternoon. And if indeed that then gets done, it would then go back to this one here. But let me double check.
Okay, back to Kim.
Thank you. So just a few things to tag on to Belinda and Stan. So it's my understanding this doesn't prohibit the offering of a program, but I hear what you're saying. I think institutions will be discouraged from wanting to do this because it's going to impact their accreditation numbers. So we would have to write things in, or accreditation entities would have to understand that those numbers shouldn't be included, so that there's no penalties to institutions in moving forward with continued accreditation. We mentioned before, job placement rates shouldn't be impacted for institutions because they may not be able to get a job in that area. So I think that if we can address that for institutions, then that will be the progressive way to move forward, knowing that they are protected, but yet still trying to offer, an opportunity to remove those barriers moving forward. Now, coming back to the original reason I had my hand raised, I want to make sure that we talk about the exit counseling really quick that David had mentioned. So, of course, it's so different for the direct loan program students. We won't know if a student maybe even ends up withdrawing beyond their choice. So maybe something happens within the facility that prohibits them from continuing. They may be transferred to another institution, and then we have no access to that student. So we wouldn't be able to make exit counseling a requirement, just a suggestion as, for the good of the student, because we would be limited in what we could actually control. But then again, David, I'd like to make sure I point out at this point that maybe we bring it up sometime later in the conversation, is the withdrawal piece of that does impact students as well. So that's all I have right now.
Aaron.
Yeah, Kim, to your point about return to Title IV aid, I do want to leave quite a bit of time to talk about other issues, that affect Title IV aid. And so hopefully, well, not hopefully, once we get through this, we can circle back to return to Title IV aid. I think you had a few other suggestions in there, professional judgments. I think that was one of them. That might have been made by another member. But I know that there are some Title IV specific issues that folks want to talk about. I wanted to get through this language. Of course, if you wanted to make a motion to discuss it now, we can. But I really wanted to get through the language and then circle back to those remaining issues after we've gotten through the language.
No, that sounds great. One addition to the bubble that I would put, and my fellow financial aid administrators on here are going to understand, Belinda's comment about at least 5 days. Let's make that at least 5 business days. Or, yeah, business days. We don't want calendar days because that could really limit us. We want business days in there. She's got a thumbs up for me, so that's good.
Aaron.
Yeah, thank you for all those comments. And just to reiterate, we're going to take all these back and discuss them. In Pell, there's the concept of Pell recalculation date. Of course, not every institution has a Pell recalculation date. So tying it in regulation to an add drop date, we'll have to take that back. I don't know if we have that defined in regulation anywhere, but we obviously do have the concept of a Pell recalculation date. Perhaps we can look there, but again, not every institution has Pell recalculation dates or utilizes Pell recalculation dates. So that's just something that we'll take back and think more about. We have the ideas about prior to enrollment, or so we have several things that we can play around with if that's and come back with a stronger recommendation.
I have no other hands at this time.
So as Belinda stated earlier, this section is about disclosures that are tied to some requirements in the definition of a prison education program. And so we will be talking about those. It potentially could be today due to the fact that we do have quite some time left. And so with that said, do we want to move on to the next section, or do we want to spend more time talking about these? Because, we will be talking about the licensure and employment prohibitions in subpart P.
Dave?
Yeah, thanks. I think we can move on after this, but I wanted to raise one more thing about the context that we're dealing with, but when we're creating these requirements. There are already requirements for disclosures related to whether a program meets the educational requirement for licensure in a given state. And again, this is really just as information for all of you in the subcommittee, but one of the requirements that was established, I believe it was in regulations published in 2020, was that an institution must notify a student if it determines that a program that the student is enrolling in would not qualify that student for licensure based on the institution's understanding of those requirements. And there's a whole set of provisions about how the school does that, when they do it, about needing acknowledgement from the student. So one of the things that I think the department will take a look at when we go back is how those requirements kind of interweave with these. We don't want to create regulations that are duplicative or achieve the same purpose. So I just think we need a little bit more time to consider those things in relation to the changes that you guys are proposing here. So I wanted to raise that, and we'll look into it and come back with some more information.
Aaron.
I also wanted to pause here and ask if our new subcommittee member Ann Preside, if you have joined the public on the public view, or if you are trying to join and you can hear this, please email Amy Wilson at amy.wilson@ed.gov for assistance in entering the session. We have not seen Ms. Preside enter the discussion yet to allow her access. So I wanted to make that on record that we are, and we will send her a message asking as well, an email asking as well if she's having trouble accessing the meeting. With that said, I think we can, well, let's do a temperature check. Let's be consistent and do a temperature check on this language. And this language also just recognizing that we will be talking about educational requirements, prohibitions on licensure and employment in subpart P. So if you have, but this is just for the disclosure that institutions will have to make related to those requirements. So if we get a temperature.
We do have a comment from Stan, I think.
Just to acknowledge that I would be a thumbs down until it is noted that it references the text that we are yet to discuss.
Okay, so Vanessa, if you could queue up like a comment bubble with the thumb, taking into account people who have a thumbs down. So if we could do the temperature check now, again, please raise your hand. And we've noted Stan's comment. Maybe Vanessa, you can say thumbs down. Stan, you can say Stan is a thumbs down until we visit the language in the definition.
Yes, I would like it cross-referenced.
Okay.
Linda?
Yes, thanks. I was just noting my thumbs down until such time as we can talk further about those bubbles or things of that nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the only two hands.
All right, Vanessa, can we go to all the way down to, I think it's at the very bottom, so it'll be 690.62. We're gonna skip over subpart P for right now, just so we can get through all of the technical things and then go into subpart P right after. Yep, right there. So you can probably scroll down a little bit, Vanessa. I think we have some. Yep, to that text. Okay. All right. So for this discussion, there were no thumbs down in this section, and but we did have just a small highlighted technical amendment to add indicator before 34 CFR 668.164. I do have to make one update to this paragraph, and I will make it now. This paragraph B has to we have to remove paragraph B. We just released a Federal Register notice on October 28th, 2021. And it was a technical package that updated our Pell regulations to include the concept of year-round Pell. So that, I'm sorry, was somebody trying to say something? I'm not really looking. Oh, okay, all right. That was to include the concept of year-round Pell, and that's been the law since the year-round Pell has been in the law since 2017. And so that's why in paragraph B was removed, because we release a Federal Register notice every year that highlights the Pell minimum. So the old regulation states that no Pell payment can be made to a student if the student's annual award is less than $200, then it adds a little more language on there. The new regulation and the rationale in the regulation, we removed 690.62B because since 2012, 2013, the change in the law has been explained in an annual Dear Colleague letter. So the Pell minimums are explained in the annual Pell payment and disbursement schedule Dear Colleague letter that we released. And so we had to delete paragraph B, which doesn't really, it's just a technical change. It doesn't affect what we're working on here. And finally, we received 2 questions from the main committee, and we also received an email on the effects of this language on lifetime eligibility used. And the department doesn't recommend any further changes to the regulatory text here. But I did draft, and my colleagues assisted me with 5 examples of how Pell is calculated when an award is required to be reduced to not exceed cost of attendance. And I'm going to just I just wanted to make a few points before we dive into those scenarios. But my first point is that anytime the amount dispersed is less than the scheduled award, the student will not have used 100% of their scheduled award. And any reduction to the student's Pell Award as a result of other aid that cannot be reduced is a reduction to the amount that the student is going to get. It is not a reduction in the student's scheduled award, because the annual eligibility used for a student is calculated by dividing the amount dispersed by the scheduled award. And so I just wanted to make those points because I think that it wasn't really clear with the main committee what this language was trying to get to. Now, I do want to pause there as well, because before we go over to the scenarios, because I did see an email from Kim, and I don't know if, would you mind speaking to that email? I know that there was a point of clarification, because I think that there was, after seeing the scenarios and after discussing with other financial aid administrators, I think the actual Pell calculation and LEU is totally understood by financial aid administrators, but I think that there was just some suggestions that were raised about just LEU in general and how appropriate it was to apply LEU to those that are incarcerated.
Sure, thank you, Aaron. It is not an easy concept to understand a lot of times, so I just wanted to clarify that lifetime eligibility, regardless of which group we're talking about, incarcerated individuals or your traditional student, they're both going to be calculated at the same rate and same usage. So one is not being negatively impacted more than the other. It's just they're going to use smaller amounts of their percentage than a traditional student, because their cost of attendance is going to be so much lower, which because of the removing of the room and board and things like that. So I think really the question, and Belinda, share if you think I'm saying this wrong, is whether or not we should impose that LEU on these students while they are incarcerated. And the idea behind that is that your traditional student can choose whatever program they want. Knowing going forward with their career, they can say, this is what I want to do, and they choose that knowingly and willingly. Incarcerated students may be subject to only a few choices, and in some instances, maybe only one, where they have no choice but to go into this one program or 2 programs. It's not really what their true career choice might be. So if they were to be released, and here they've used up a percentage of their Pell Grant, then when they are released and they go to the field that they really truly wanted to do as their career, then they're already inhibited by use of the Pell Grant to finish out that next degree. So it's just a thought to ask that the lifetime eligibility not be impactful to the incarcerated individual until they're released, and then it can start at that point. Does that help, Aaron?
It does help. Thank you very much for that clarification. And I think with that, I don't think I'll go through every single one of the scenarios because I know that But I do want to go through one just to have it on the record, but just so people can see, because I know there's been a lot of discussion about it. But we'll put a comment bubble into the document. With your suggestion, I did want to raise that lifetime eligibility used is statutory. The statute limits the student to 6 scheduled awards. We measure those awards in percentages. So the percentage of the scheduled award the student uses every award year is, they're added on top of each other until the student reaches the 600% lifetime eligibility used. So that is in the statute. And we in our Pell updates that I just talked about, the revisions that we did to the regulation to incorporate the year-round Pell concept, we did also update that language as well to demonstrate in the regulations that a student would be limited to the equivalent of 6 scheduled awards. I think, as I stated before, I mean, if there's a way we can make that clearer, that statutory context clearer in regulation, I think that's where we can probably take recommendations. But that is the statutory requirement, so we are required to enforce that for all students.
Yes, and that's what I figured. So, in addition then to the onboarding process, that's another piece that we would want to make sure is very clear for students going into a program and what that might look like. So maybe that's where we put that piece. I know I keep saying onboarding, but it's just so important to get everything up front so correct decisions can be made.
So with that, I just wanted to walk through one scenario to have, so that the community or financial aid administrators listening and that still have concerns about the way that we'll be calculating, or the way that eligibility use will be calculated if the student's award is combined with other aid that cannot be reduced. So Vanessa, would you mind screen sharing the scenarios for us? And we'll only go through one. So, and I think that'll save us on some time. Oh, perfect. So here, if you just scroll up a bit, Vanessa. Yeah. So the bolded part here is that we have these are just students that these are not real students. I'm sure there are some real students with these names, but I've just created these students. They're enrolled at University of ABC in a prison education program in general studies that leads to an associate's degree. It's a standard term program with 1 fall and 1 spring payment period, and their cost of attendance is $6,495. Many of you recognize that that is max Pell for 2021, 2022. And so our first example, to scroll down a little more, Vanessa, please. All right, thank you very much, right there. So our first example is Jerry, and he attends he's enrolled in the program full time for the full award year, and he has an EFC of 0. That's EFC is expected family contribution. That's calculated when the student enters all of their information on the FAFSA, and the department or our central processing system does analysis of their need behind the scenes based on different characteristics. And so Jerry's scheduled award is $6,495. That is the maximum for the 2021-22 award year. And Jerry also gets a VA education and training benefit for $5,495. And the VA states that this aid can't be reduced. In our proposed regulations, we say if they get other aid that pushes the total aid above cost of attendance, you have to reduce that aid first. However, the VA is saying we're not gonna reduce the VA benefit. And so Jerry's total award now is $11,000 plus. So our current B, because remember we had to get rid of the B because due to a technical change. So the proposed language that we're proposing to add will be the new B. So Jerry, you have to pay Pell. We're going to pay Pell in 2 payment periods, right? We have the fall payment period, and a lot of people would. When I was in school, we just said like semester, right? But in Title IV speak, we say payment period. And so we have the fall payment period and we have the spring payment period, and you divide the scheduled award into 2, right? That would be the case if Jerry was not incarcerated. However, the university has to reduce Jerry's award, right? Because to $1,000, because that addition of the VA benefit would have caused Jerry's award to exceed cost of attendance. So what we're going to do is the university determines, so the university determines this by subtracting the $11,990 by the $6,495. So Jerry's Jerry's cost of attendance is exceeded by $5,495, and then the university then subtracts that the amount above from Jerry's award. The university subtracts the amount above Jerry's Pell Award from Jerry's original award, leaving $1,000. So that's how much Jerry can actually get in Pell. And then remember, we still have to pay it in 2 payment periods. And so for the fall payment period, Jerry's going to get $500 in Pell, and for the spring payment period, Jerry's going to get $500 in Pell. And the way that looks for eligibility used, which has been the main part of discussion, is that Jerry will actually only end up using 15% of his scheduled award. So that's how much will be added to his lifetime eligibility use, right? So he's that much. Let's say this is Jerry's first semester ever. Jerry's lifetime eligibility use right now will be 15.3964%. Of course, if this is his 3rd or 4th or 5th year, it could be higher than that, depending on how much Pell he used before then. But it will increase by at least 15%. Scroll down a little bit, Vanessa, so I can. Thank you to Sam. I'll just talk about one more. This is kind of the same scenario above, except that Sam did not get a VA education benefit, right? So Sam is the same cost of attendance as Jerry. He has the same EFC as Jerry, 0 EFC, but Sam received no other financial assistance. So in this case, Sam, his LEU would increase by 100%, because Sam is going to get his entire scheduled award for the fall and spring term that was split into 2 payments. I think David wanted to add something.
Just very quick, as you guys are looking at these examples, when we say that the LEU increases by 100% for the year, remember that, as Aaron has pointed out before, that the way that the department calculates lifetime eligibility, eligibility ends when the student reaches 600%. So when we say a student has had 100% use, that means 1 full year of their eligibility has been used.
So we have, 3 more scenarios here that we kind of just try to allay some of the concerns of the main committee. But now that Kim has clarified what the real concerns were, I think, not the real concerns, but, more clarified on what some of the other concerns were. I think we're hopefully we reflected that that the regulations should not be amended any further. And I want to pause for a second and then move us into a temperature check.
Kim, I believe you're on mute.
I am. Sorry about that. Aaron, this brings up a point that was also in the issue paper we sent out to the subcommittee. What if a student wants to decline their Pell Grant but still be part of the program? What does that look like? So, for instance, this student had VA benefits, so do they have to do anything special to say they choose not to use their Pell if they want to save it for later?
I have to defer to David for that one.
Dave, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a very good question. And in that case, in fact, the student is permitted to decline their Pell Grant for the period. The department going back to when the statutory limitation on the number of years that a student can receive a Pell Grant was first introduced, the department heard from schools and others that declining a Pell Grant could very well be part of an overall strategy of a student to preserve their eligibility in a situation where they had other resources, or there was some other reason that they didn't want the Pell Grant for a particular period. So since that time, the department has allowed students to for any reason that the student determines that they want to decline it for. So in the circumstance that you described, Kim, a student would be permitted to say, I don't want any of my Pell Grant for this period. I just want to have the veterans benefits. And in that case, the student would not receive Pell for the period, and no lifetime eligibility would be used. I would note that if a student does not decline the Pell Grant, and this may be where Kim is sort of pointing to, the institution is required to provide the student with the maximum amount for which the student is eligible. So the student does have to proactively decline the award in order for the school to avoid providing them with funds for which they're otherwise eligible. But they do have that ability to decline the amount.
Thank you, David, for that clarification, because it is an entitlement, so we don't want to step on that.
That's right.
Oh, I had another question and I just completely lost it. It'll come back, I'm sure.
Kim again.
I remembered. So let's say the student chooses to decline their Pell for the fall semester, and then they receive other benefits, whatever they may be, that covers their entire semester for the spring. Is it only the semesters they receive a Pell Grant in that are counted in the overall metrics? Or is it just by being in the PAT program?
Dave.
That's another good question. And you're asking about when Pell LEU is calculated?
No, not necessarily. I'm just talking about students who so they come into the Pell eligible program. They're in the metrics as an enrolled student. Do they still get counted regardless if they get the Pell or not? So they're eligible for the Pell, they just declined it. Would they be in the metrics at the end of the, all the data that we're going to be pulling and counted towards at the end of all of this to make decisions moving on in the years? Will they be part of that if there's just the Pell semesters that are used?
So I can't give you a final answer on that yet because the department is still determining how it's going to analyze and evaluate prison education programs and how we're going to collect data to support that analysis. Obviously, in the case that you described, the student's LEU wouldn't be counted. They have to receive disbursements of Pell in order for that to count toward their lifetime eligibility. But in terms of whether they are an individual that the department would track, I think the department has in mind that we will try to identify the individuals who apply for Pell Grant funds but do not ultimately receive them to the extent that we can. Now, remember that once a student applies for aid, we know about them in that year, and we can have some information about them and for example, the reasons that they didn't qualify for Pell, some basic information that they provide on the FAFSA. But we may not receive subsequent enrollment information about that student if the National Student Loan Data System doesn't ultimately collect their enrollment information at subsequent institutions. That said, it is still very likely that we will be able to collect that information because most institutions report their total enrollment regardless. But I can't confirm that those individuals would always be perfectly reported upon in every case.
Thank you, David.
No other hands at this moment in time.
Thank you, Sophia. So I think we can, with Kim's comments noted, I think, let's see. Vanessa, can you bring back up the proposed mandatory language, please? And if you wouldn't mind scrolling up a bit. So so we've added comment bubbles, Kim, to account for adding Pell LEU to LEU counseling on interest for entrance counseling. And we need to take back and clarify whether an individual, if an individual declines Pell, would they still be counted in any of the Ed or Bureau of Prisons, Department of Corrections metrics for determining best interest. And then I think we have one more comment bubble. If you scroll up a little bit, Vanessa. Let's see. I think we do. Okay, so I think we already answered that one. So with that, can we take a temperature check, knowing that we have to regulate within the statutory framework of 6 scheduled awards? Would we need can we take a temperature check on the language just in 690.62? So I see Kim's recommendation would really not impact this. It would probably impact whether we put entrance counseling into 668 somewhere else. Wherever the department maybe recommends to put it. So can we just take a temperature check on the language as is here on the screen? And if you have if you have a thumbs down, raise your hand and please state why.
I don't see any hands.
Okay, so Vanessa, can you put another comment bubble and or you can add to one that's already there, either one, just to say that we had no thumbs down for the section. Thank you. And could you scroll all the way up to where it says, let's see, subpart, it should say subpart P. No, actually it says, it says 34, 668. So there it goes. All right. So I think we're gonna have to pause here one more time. I believe that we have Soren Lagarde replacing our counsel, replacing Ronald Sanders, our counsel. Has Soren joined us?
Hello, Aaron. I'm here.
Hi, Soren. Would you mind coming on camera and introducing yourself? I don't know if the subcommittee's had a chance to meet you yet.
Maybe they haven't. So as Aaron said, my name is Soren Lagarde, and I'll be working and helping here with Subpart P.
Okay, so as stated earlier, we did say that we wanted to provide the prison education program language with its own subpart, as opposed to trying to put it all into the existing language in 668.8. I don't think we should need to take a temperature check on that unless a subcommittee member feels strongly that it should remain in 668.8. It would have its own entire subpart dedicated to prison education programs. And so here we just rework the structure. And does anybody have any questions about how we did this or why we did this or? Okay. So the first section, at the beginning of a subpart, most of our subparts begin with a scope and purpose. It's 668.243. That's where we're proposing to. We're following along. I think the last regulatory provision, it was before this, was 668.233. So we're doing 668.234. I'm sorry, I'm like mixing my numbers up. And so this is just introduction that we've drafted, and you see it's all in highlight because it's all new language. So it's just kind of an overview of, what the reader can expect coming in the regulations laid out in this subpart. Does anybody have any comments on the language or anything you'd like to add? This is more of it's just a summary. So I think we have some flexibility in here to add some language. I'll give everybody a second to read it. Okay. So doesn't look, Sophie, do we have any hands or?
No, no
All right,
hands.
so I'd like to take a temperature check on it. You know, is the subcommittee okay with this language as proposed here? Just the overall summary. If no hands are raised.
No hands are raised.
All right, let's move into the next section. Here is most of our subparts also contain a definition section, and so I think you can see on this slide we've referenced on the screen share we referenced 2 definitions in 600.2. That was additional location and confined or incarcerated individual. That the juvenile justice piece. That will be moved. So that will be moved back to 600.2. So that will no longer be there. So I can actually take that out now. So that's not something that we're looking at that could impact or either me or Vanessa. Let's see. That would just go away, and then I can just note that has been moved to 600.2. And so the one definition that we are proposing is to add the oversight entity definition. And that is because the statute references the statutory language is the appropriate state Department of Corrections or other entity that's responsible for overseeing correctional facilities or the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And it repeats that language in a few places. We had that repeated all over the regulation, and we thought that oversight entity would be a more succinct, simple way of like referring to that entire statutory clause. So that's essentially the only definition that we've added to the definition section in the prison education program subpart.
We have some comments. First, Belinda, and then Stan.
Thank you. I would like to propose that we pause on a status check on the oversight entity means until we have a chance to actually review. And I do remember it is all over the language, and I definitely understand that. But now that we have something here, I would like to definitely not do a temperature check on this until we get the whole context first, so that then potentially we could provide some amendatory language if needed for that. So I just wanted to kind of put that there, because this is the first time obviously that we're seeing it as this, and it makes sense, but I just want to see it in the context of everything else first before we do a temperature check on that. Thank you.
Stan?
Yeah, similarly, I would agree, because I want to propose, I think how I was going to propose is to add like a sub definition, and that's how I was going to propose to add this idea of an advisory committee that helps to advise the Department of Corrections or that other entity in the overseeing of the or just to assist in the several different places where oversight entity is mentioned. So I don't know, as Belinda mentioned, it is going to come up again here in a second. So I don't know if it's more appropriately to actually add it within this definition, which I think maybe it would be. So that way, every time it is mentioned, oversight is mentioned, there is this definition, the appropriate State Department, etc., and then add a sub definition saying that is advised by an advisory committee made up of X members that should be somewhere later in the language. So my proposal would be to add a sub bullet point to that.
Aaron?
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask Vanessa to add that too, but she's already doing it.
Stan, did you have something else?
Well, I was just going, if she needed me to repeat anything.
Do you want to revise anything I wrote, or does it look good, Stan?
That looks good. And I mean, to add that the members of the advisory group, we've listed that, I think, later of what that advisory group may look like. We listed some potential stakeholders further down.
Stan, do we have the language, or is it something that is going to be submitted or developed later?
I think we are going to be sending that to you soon, but I mean, I mentioned it was in the bullet, just the stakeholder groups that we mentioned last time were in the bullet. We're in the bubbles, I mean.
No other hands right now, unless you want to respond further, Aaron.
No, I think we have the bubble, and I think we have. I think we'll just have to. We can either reference back to the bubbles from the first session, or wait for the language that will be submitted. So we're gonna pause on the temperature check here, and move into the next section. That would be 668.236, eligible prison education program. So here we're going to get into the definition of the prison education program. So what we've done here is, you can see in paragraphs A, B, C, and D, where we've removed that the kind of like the longer sentence, the appropriate state departments of corrections, et cetera, and added oversight entity. So these could be viewed as technical changes to improve clarity. We've also updated a few legal citations. You can see like the indicators that were put before 34 CFR 600.4, 600.6, and then let's see. Paragraph C, there's a technical change, and that's also it doesn't affect the substance. It doesn't change that substance. It just kind of clarifies the paragraph and makes it, more succinct, adding the information about the oversight entity. But for paragraph C, I did know that one of Belinda's points of clarification was specifically about the initial 2-year period. So I wanted to pause on paragraph C to see if there were any further comments on this.
And we'll start with Stan and then Belinda.
So this was, so it looks like the bubble was removed, but we had given, and this is, Dr. McTeer had mentioned a bubble in this particular part as well, if I recall correctly. But this is where, this is why I think it would be important to add in that definition. If you're simply going to say oversight entity here, this is where we would want to add this advisory group that helps to advise the decision of the correctional entity. And we had written out, I mean, that advisory group included stakeholders such as the accrediting institution, institutions of higher education. It included community-based organizations, reentry organizations. We had a list of it, but I don't see it anymore.
Belinda?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going backwards and forwards between the previous one and then this one here too. So there's definitely a mandatory language that we do want to offer up into here, but some of the bubbles that I had with a mandatory language are now not working with the now, crossed out stuff. I will just offer anecdotally something else, which I don't want to, in offering this, I don't want to, like, Stan's point is really is important here. So, but just with regards to the 2-year, I did have language that I will send the subcommittee with regards to this whole idea of, like, because a lot of constituents of all subcommittee members, our constituent groups have talked about how the 2-year period just is way too short. So one of the things that we have as a mandatory language is possibly like some kind of like probationary period. Like if we think of traditional education accreditation standards, there's a comprehensive review that happens at, say, for example, year 6, but there might be a preliminary kind of smaller document that educational institutions need to provide an accreditation agency at year 3, for example. So that's one of the mandatory language pieces that will be coming to the subcommittee group later this afternoon once we finish. So I definitely wanted to give voice to that because I can see that that's still, and let me clarify, Aaron, with you, now that the 2-year isn't, it's being kind of crossed out here, does that mean we're still possibly able to provide a mandatory language about that time frame here? Or I just want a point of clarification with that, because I'm a little, you guys gave us all this and everything. I'm just still trying to look at the document that I have with the mandatory language and then back to this document with some of the stuff crossed out.
Sure, I can respond to that. Now I want to turn over to our OGC counsel, Soren. So we still have the initial 2-year period. So it's a lot of red in there, but it's tucked in there. It says after an initial 2-year approval is determined by the oversight entity. So all that language that's crossed out is just that, the appropriate State Department, Bureau of Prisons. So we still have the initial 2-year period in there. And we did mention in the response to your email that we are willing to, we want to see your proposed language, and so once we get that, perhaps it could be incorporated here. I know I don't want to jump ahead too far to the best interest, but I guess I am jumping ahead. But, in the best interest piece, I think we'll see, probably not today, but tomorrow, how the department did try and draft some language around the Bureau of Prisons, State Departments of Corrections, reaching out to relevant stakeholders in order to make these determinations. And so, for example, I'll just read one quickly. For the whether the rates of a confined or incarcerated individual continuing their education post-release, as determined by the percentage of students who re-enroll in higher education reported by the Department of Education, meet thresholds established by the oversight entity with input from relevant stakeholders, which must include, among others, incarcerated students, organizations representing incarcerated students, and accrediting agencies. So I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at that language that we've incorporated into several of the indicators, but we have tried to resolve for some of the comments that were made in the first session about there being a lack of a collaboration amongst community stakeholders, or relevant stakeholders, I'm sorry, including, but not to exclude, including incarcerated students. So.
Soren.
Thank you. Yeah, and just what Aaron was saying was going to be my point as well, just that we've included that language there. If you're looking down further down the page towards a new section of 241, the best interest determination. And so Aaron, cited paragraph A1, but we've also included it in A1, 2, 4, and then 8 as well. So in 4 different areas. But, again, don't want us to jump too far ahead here, but that's where that language now lives. And we thought that, again, breaking out the best interest determination, since that was a pretty important determination and pretty long, that would be easier to understand in terms of the organization of the regulation. Thank you.
Dr. McTier.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the oversight entity. I see you all just dropped the work collaboratively text that I had previously suggested back into the document. And I don't know if it's just to show where it was at or what happened to it, but it looks like it's just completely been eradicated. And so I am not a fan of this. And by simply saying the oversight entity, it's a clever way to push out the important people from the table. So I think it's important to spell out exactly who we want at the table, because again, this is a new provision that's been provided, and we want to make sure it's clear and concise. I just think the oversight entity is too vague.
Kim?
Thank you. Going back to the 2-year approval, just for my colleagues to think about, each school has a different level of what is their highest credential that they offer. So maybe it gets tied back to that as when the oversight is looked at, because you don't want, I'm from a 2-year institution, so we don't want to go 6 years before someone comes in and looks at our program to make sure we're doing what we need to do. Maybe our time frame is less than a 4-year institution. So just keep that in mind maybe when we're talking later in our subgroup.
I'm sorry, can I just, Kim, just so we can capture that point, did you want us to establish different initial periods based on institution? Like, so for a 2-year school would have a shorter initial period, or?
Right, so we were saying earlier that through Belinda that 2 years is probably too little of a time. So, but when we do determine what that level should be, I think it can be important to make sure we're acknowledging institutions in their highest level of credential, and then looking at that to make a determination of when the oversight entity should be coming in and taking a look at. Again, it's going to keep your bad players out of the mix sooner than later.
Vanessa, can you add a comment bubble quickly? Not quickly, but like, can you add a comment bubble just to say, take into consideration type of institution, institution's highest credential offering in time frame for the initial approval. Kim, could you just expand on that just a little more? So for, like, let's say the highest credential offering is an associate's, what would be the time frame versus, a bachelor's or?
Well, I think you could look at maybe tying it to the kind of like the SLU did, where we would, if you have 2-year credentials are highest, then maybe at 3 years.
Okay.
You come in, or if it's 4, then you go to 6.
Of initial, like just no. Okay, all right. Okay. So Vanessa, can you put that in there? 3 years for 2-year institutions, 6 years for 4-year institutions.
Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, it makes sense. I just wanted to make sure we captured it and, we're able to respond to it tomorrow or at a later date. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Stan.
Yes, so I would like to go back up to the oversight entity, and the language that I would like to propose is you can copy it from Dr. McTier's and I's comment. So if you scroll down and copy what we had already said previously, the only addition to that would need to be added is if you subpoint it, you can just simply say the above oversight entity, the above oversight entity's decision will be made, and paste everything that you have there. And this was something I'm, you know, as Dr. McTeer mentioned, it's frustrating that, you know, we specifically mentioned, it seems to me that, you know, it is not this subcommittee that is making the decisions on what the language should be, which is what, to my understanding, it should be. That's what we are, you know, gathered here for, is for us as the subcommittee to make the language. And, you know, we specifically asked for that to be added. And instead it was, you know, quite cleverly removed and added in other places. Adding it in those other places does not give it the strength of adding it in the place that we had originally asked for it to be added in.
Kim, is your hand still up? Okay. Aaron?
Let's see. Sorry, So with that said, thank you for your comments, Dan, first. I did want to move us into paragraph D because I think, you know, we've captured your points. I mean, to respond to your comments, Dan, I don't want to interpret what you are saying. But I do want to just say that not including the comment bubble was not a clever attempt to mask or hide you or Dr. McTeer's suggestions. If you look over the entire document, I think the entire subcommittee will see that no one's comments were included in this draft. They were all removed. The only comments in the draft are comments from the Department of Education. So you'll see, you know, like as you'll see author where the subcommittee members, this language has been simply removed. A department official or department staff person added those comments. But there were many comments made by many people other than you, Stan, and Dr. McTeer that are not in this document. There are none of the comments from session 1 are in this document. It is all new comments or new explanations or directed questions for the subcommittee in this document. You'll see a lot of them under the best interest piece, which we hope to spend a lot of time talking about. But there was no attempt to hide that suggestion. In fact, what we tried to do was incorporate your suggestions into the best interest piece. So I think with that, I hope that we can move to the next portion for discussion, and that would be one of Kim's recommendations for paragraph D.
We still have a comment from Dr. McTeer.
So if I'm understanding, so this entire document, 12-page document that we got, this is what we're working off of now, but it doesn't have anything that we've worked so hard on the last session. Wouldn't we want to have that document? Because now, honestly, I'm becoming confused by trying to keep track of what's added, what's not added, what's been, you know, eradicated. And that level of confusion for me as I'm looking at this latest document, I don't know what's being proposed and what's not, or when we're going to receive that combined information. It just becomes daunting to try to sift through all of the information and then to go back and to recall where we made notes at and whatnot. As I mentioned before, I'm a visual learner, and so I like to see. So these bubble comments help, but if you're removing our stuff, and if this is not the official document, then I'm kind of confused as to what we're doing.
Stan, do you want to respond first, or should we go to Stan, Aaron?
I can this evening and try and add back in the comments that were made in the first round. I've stated verbally where the department has made an update based on a subcommittee member's recommendation. And in fact, we will see that in the next paragraph. Indeed, Kim made a recommendation in the previous round to define the oversight entity. I'm sorry, define the post-secondary institution as the entity that makes the determination on where students will be most likely to return upon release. And so you'll see there that we have adopted Kim's suggestion. It just doesn't say Kim Carey in the bullet made this suggestion. And so what I can do is I can go back through and add tonight where subcommittee members made suggestions, and this document that is projected to you will have all that information.
Stan?
Thank you, Aaron. I think that would be helpful because I was, those are kind of landmarks for me to like know where I want to add, my points that I had made, and I think they'll be helpful. And again, to the point, it looks like, and I know this is, you all are, working to, do the best that we can. I believe that you're working in that interest to get this done, but, what you did was kind of take our suggestions and kind of do what you wanted to do with them and incorporate them the way that you wanted to, instead of incorporating them just the way that we asked them to be. So this language, particularly pertaining to this, we specifically wanted, that advisory stakeholder group to be at the level of overall, to be part of the overall decision making on all those best interest bullet points, instead of picking a best interest bullet point to say that it should be part of. My suggestion that I just made, I want, that's, I think I want to have that in the language, and that's why we made the suggestion. That's what we made the suggestion for earlier. The other thing that I was going to propose to the committee, me personally, this is me. I feel that we're in need of a break, and I would like to propose a break.
If I could just respond to that, we do end at 3 o'clock today, Stan. What I can try and do tomorrow is incorporate a break. I think with 23 minutes left, I would hope that we can, push through today.
Oh, yeah, that's my fault. I'm on the main committee as well, and we go an hour longer. So my apologies. Yes, that's correct.
Oh, no, but tomorrow I think, is going to be mainly the definition of we're going to be in subpart P tomorrow mainly. Perhaps a break around 2, a 10-minute break would be beneficial.
Dr. McTeer.
Yes, so just to kind of go back on this information. So you mentioned that as an example, Kim's thought was added to the text. And so that again lets me know that what we proposed was not added. And I remember specifically having a long conversation about the stakeholder piece. And so it seems as if the Department of Ed is not wanting to add that information into this. Is that what I'm taking from this? If we've added other suggestions throughout this particular document, the very most important part in terms of stakeholder collaboration that needs to be added is not being considered. Is that my understanding and takeaway from this?
I think we have a different understanding of what we've tried to do. We've tried to add that to the best interest piece. I did read a bit. I do remember Vanessa scrolled to, Vanessa, you have to scroll to it again, but I believe Vanessa scrolled to it. If that language is not sufficient, as you stated, or if that language is not what you like to see, we've noted that. Well, we've noted that that's language you would not like to see. You would like to see different language added to the definition of an oversight entity. So we put a comment bubble there, and I think there's think we have to move to paragraph D at this point. I don't know if it's beneficial to, you know, just, I don't want to just give you the same answer over and over again, you know, so.
Well, I'm asking for clarity, so please don't blow me off. My understanding from this document is that elements have been added into this document. Is that what I'm taking away from this? And it seems like that's a yes. Am I correct?
I'll let Soren, I think Soren wants to make some statement.
Thanks so much. No, Dr. McTeer, no, the purpose of reorganization didn't change or add anything here, at least as so far as just reorganizing things. What was happening is, as we were going through and this subcommittee met and proposed the reg, is it became really kind of unwieldy, right? And so, you know, we had folks who looked at it and tried to read it, you know, not having, you know, engaged in any of this work, and just tried to, like, plain language look at it, and it was getting a little bit much. And so, you know, knowing how important best interest was, we broke that into a section that is going to be discussed below. I hope that helps. I don't think we did in any way try to change, you know, anything that, you know, otherwise we were trying to do there through the reorganization. And it, just as a personal to the members of the committee, if this is subcommittee, if this is helpful, sometimes I view this document on just clean or a clean draft, so because with the highlights and if you have the red line, it can be a little difficult to actually, you know, see what is the actual language that the department is proposing. So hopefully that's helpful.
I don't see any hands at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to paragraph D. So here we have, so there are several places in the regulation that kind of talk about a federal correctional facility and some entity, someone or some school having to determine where most students will reside upon release from the correctional facility. And Kim recommended that the post-secondary institution decide where a student in a correctional facility is most likely to reside upon release. So we've added that language throughout the document, and that this is one of the places that we've added it. And that is in regard to the transferability of credit to at least one institution of higher education, either in the state if it's something other than a federal correctional facility, or the state that most students are likely to reside if it is a federal facility, as determined by the post-secondary, the school, post-secondary institution. And that's based on based on information provided by the oversight entity. Keep in mind, you know, the oversight entity was the BOP-DOC entity. So the school will have the ultimate authority in making that determination. So I'll pause there for comment. In fact, I'll do a directly question. Kim, does this kind of align with what you would have wanted to see generally for the most likely to reside language?
Yes, it is, because if I remember correctly, it was the DOC was going to make that determination, and that didn't make sense because we're the ones working with the students in the onboarding and throughout their program to determine where they're going to land upon their release. So.
Okay, let's move to, well, I think temperature checks would be better for like the entire part, the entire like 668.236. So I'll wait to do a temperature check. I won't do it paragraph by paragraph. But I'm sorry, Sophia, did we have any more hands raised for that?
No, we did not.
Okay. All right. So for paragraph E, we had a suggestion from Belinda to cross-reference to our definition section in the accreditation regulations. Keep in mind, we do have our Elizabeth Daggett, our accreditation expert, on with us for the full day today. So if anybody has any questions about accreditation, she is here as our advisor. But here, we've added that, we just added the cross-reference here. And so Any comments on that? I think we've just accepted with the recommendation. And also, we discussed the idea of adding a program review as suggested by Kim. However, we don't recommend adding that here. A program review is an investigation of an institution's compliance with Title IV requirements, and they're performed for a variety of reasons. And so some program reviews are conducted as a result of FSA's risk analysis. Others are routine evaluations of an institution's compliance with Title IV requirements and are not associated with potential risk. So in some cases, program reviews will result in liabilities or other negative actions against an institution by the department, but some result in no negative actions whatsoever. So therefore, it's in the department's view that it is more appropriate to condition eligibility on the result of a program review, such as a limitation or termination. You know, in the statute, we have suspension, emergency action, and termination, rather than a program review itself. So I will pause there in case Kim wanted to had any comments on that.
Thank you, Aaron. I think I just wanted to clarify that, I mean, sometimes it can be years that an institution is starting a program review and ending a program review. And during that time frame, you're very limited as an institution on what you can do. So I just wanted to make sure that during that time, could an institution actually go into a partnership with a correctional facility to start offering these types of programs, or are they really locked down and saying, well, not until that program review is ended and a determination has been made? So I just know it's very restricted on even who you can talk to at DOE while you're in a program review. So that's really what I was getting to.
Thank you, Kim. And I think, I think I might have said it too fast, but we think that we should condition the eligibility of the prison education program on the result of the program review. And so it would be the result that whether, the department decides to limit or terminate that the institution's participation in the Title IV programs. And then the paragraph also says, within the last 5 years. So of course, if there was any of those issues in the last 5 years, not just a program review, but a suspension, emergency action, or termination in the last 5 years, then that's when the institution would not be able to provide a prison education program. And only at that point would they not be able to provide it. Of course, there are some other things that we'll talk about, like the initiated adverse action that we've added, but for at least from the department's perspective, we're recommending to keep it to the suspension, emergency action, and termination, or termination.
Dave?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to Kim's question. When a program review is initiated, the primary limitation in the law about providing information about that program review is on the department's findings and related information coming out of the program review. So, for example, neither the department nor the institution are permitted in general to share the program review report with anyone other than a small number of oversight bodies. The same thing would be true in this circumstance, mostly because the department considers an open program review to be something that has not yet been established or decided. And I want to defer in part to my OGC colleague Soren here. In most cases, the department does not choose to take an action or to prevent an institution from doing something without finalizing a determination about something about the institution. So that's part of why we're recommending here not to introduce the concept of program reviews into this set of restrictions, because program reviews could mean nothing if we determine that there are no problems, or even if we're in the middle of determining whether there are problems at an institution, we wouldn't necessarily want to take an action on that basis or across the board prevent an institution from offering a prison education program. So that's I just wanted to say that's our general approach to this, is that program reviews are sort of an ongoing process until we publish a final program review determination, and that establishes what we identified as compliance errors, and that could result in some of these actions, and we might want to condition eligibility on those.
Thank you, and I brought it up initially because I agree with you. I don't think it should be held against an institution trying to enter into this partnership. So just to bring it up and make sure that, you could have some institutions that are in the middle of that and don't know that they may think it hinders them from participating, and we want to make sure that they know it does not. So thank you.
That's right.
And I do not see any hands at this moment.
Thank you, Sophia. So moving into the next section, we only have a few more left. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them before we close today, but there were no thumbs down on paragraph F, which will be new paragraph F. Will no longer be paragraph 7. I think that's what you're seeing on your screen. Yeah. So I think we can move to the paragraph G. This paragraph F was just about the initiated adverse action, and we have added, just made some very technical updates to this paragraph, but nothing that would change the substance of it. I don't believe we had any thumbs down on this paragraph last time, so I'll pause there for comment. So essentially, this paragraph is saying that if an institution is subject to a current initiated adverse action, they would not be able to offer a prison education program until that adverse action was rescinded. And they would also have to produce a teach-out plan. Or submit a teach-out plan, sorry, to their accreditor.
I see no hands.
Thank you, Sophia. All right, paragraph G. This was about the program satisfying, ensuring that programs that do lead to licensure or certification do satisfy all of the educational requirements, whether that be if it's a federal facility in the state that most students are most likely to return, or if it's anything other than a federal facility, the requirements in the state in which that facility is located. And here we have made a change. Again, we updated the language based on Kim's feedback. And so he said, as determined by the institution. And we've also added not less than annually based on information provided by the oversight entity to ensure that, that the post-secondary institution is continuing to evaluate their students to make sure that the licensure requirements, the educational requirements are in line with either the state or the state that the students are most likely to return. And so that's why we want to have that periodic annual review for federal correctional facilities. That should be a consumer good for the student, because the program will always ensure that they're following the educational requirements of that whatever state most students will return to.
I see no hands.
Okay, and let's begin the conversation on H. This is the paragraph that informs the disclosures that we were talking about under 668.43. And this paragraph had a lot of discussion in our first session, and this was about not offering education that is designed to lead to licensure or employment for a specific job or occupation if in the state, if that job or occupation typically involves prohibitions on licensure or employment to formerly incarcerated individuals. And again, we have that federal clause, most likely to return to, or state clause, whatever state the whatever state that the correctional facility is located in. The department added 1 and 2 to provide more background on, or more of an explanation on the regulatory, on the statutory text. And we did get some thumbs down here and a recommendation from Terrell. And Terrell recommended that a student, and again, I will add these comment bubbles, but Terrell did recommend that a student can acknowledge prohibition a student should be able to acknowledge prohibition to licensure or employment and still enroll in a program after counseling. From the department's perspective, we cannot override the provision in statute which prohibits students from enrolling in a program which would lead to licensure or employment in a field which is not currently accessible to individuals with criminal convictions. By defining this part of the statute to only apply where a state or federal law prohibits employment, we believe we can protect students from predatory institutions while maintaining as many options as possible within the language of the statute for students to pursue education. So I'll pause there for comment because I know we only have 5 minutes left, so I don't want to go on and on. I want people to be able to comment.
Stan.
So again, pointing to the typically point. So because typically is in there, it's not barring a program from offering it and doing it as Terrell mentioned. So I mean, we have 5 minutes left. I don't know what we intend to get into in 5 minutes to try to even to jump into this, but you know, I certainly have more to say, and I don't think that we can get through what needs to be discussed in this in 5 minutes.
Belinda, if I could I'm sorry, Belinda. I think I'm always in a position to be like, Belinda, can you just give me a second? But I wanted to just cue up the conversation. I think that we are definitely I think I even alluded to it before I started, that we'll likely return to this tomorrow morning, first thing. I anticipate a lot of discussion around this, and I'm not proposing to take a temperature check on this paragraph before 3. I just wanted to, you know, introduce it, and therefore we can just dive right into it tomorrow.
Belinda.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for Stan, for your comments, my friend. This was one of the emails that I'd sent out to the subcommittee asking for clarification with regards to that. And I want to thank Ed for responding to me and where we could potentially go in this space. Two of the recommendations that Ed had mentioned here is, you know, within this framework, the subcommittee could consider whether recommendations should be made about how an institution would make those determinations of what a typical prohibition on the licensure or employment might be, and then also that the subcommittee may also have recommendations on programs ensuring that they're keeping track of rapidly changing laws in this space. I think one thing that I've learned a lot about in this space is just how different certain things are, and how some states seem very progressive in wanting to kind of open things up, you know, to people that have some form of carceral experience, and trying to open up careers and licensure for those individuals, where some states seem quite less excited about kind of taking those approaches. So one of the things that I will be doing with the subcommittee tonight is, you know, sending an email out to everyone with regards to some of those recommendations that Ed has there, and perhaps proposing a very early kind of draft form of a mandatory language. And I'm very interested to see what, you know, subcommittees have to say here, because some of the things such as, you know, keeping track of rapidly changing laws, you know, is there an actual website that we might recommend that keeps track of these things, so that we can kind of make sure that, you know, educational programs and things of that nature, there can be some kind of positive pressure to bear, you know, on some states that, you know, perhaps you know, can be made, that, you know, the licensure can open up, you know, for those students. So so I just wanted to say Thank you, Ed, for acknowledging, my clarification. I appreciated your feedback. It's still something I'm definitely working on, so I'll send an email to the subcommittee members overnight and just say that I definitely recommend, welcome their comments on this, because I do think, as Stanley pointed out and others had previously, that this is an area where we can really add some value. Thank you.
Aaron.
Thank you, Belinda. Yeah, I did, in response to those rapidly changing laws, if the law changes in an occupation, and an occupation becomes newly open to formerly incarcerated students, institutions would be able to add those programs at the time. And, like you said, we do seek feedback on language to ensure institutions will reflect updates to federal and state laws as soon as possible. I think the idea here was that Pell is limited. We've talked about that quite extensively in some of the examples, to 6 scheduled awards, and we really do look forward to your feedback. I know that this was a place that you said that you indicated you would provide. There would be some mandatory language coming our way, and so we look forward to seeing what that language is. And with that, I think we should close for the day. It is 3 o'clock now, and thank everybody. I wanted to thank the entire subcommittee and everybody from the Department of Education that assisted with this process, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Bye.